from time to time, Genesis, she's going to be chiming in. So before we actually get into the presentation, tell us a little something about you. Like, where do you come from? Who are you? You know, so the listener audience have like somewhat of a bird's eye view about you.
Yeah, no problem. Praise the mighty Yah. I'm from New York originally. I'm from Long Island, New York, and grew up in Long Island, New York, Freeport, and then I moved out to Ohio, where I learned about the truth of the mighty Yah in Cincinnati, and I was taught by Moreh Elisha ben Yisrael, who was the elder and head teacher of the House of Yisrael in Cincinnati. And this was over 20 years ago now. And I've been teaching in the House of Yisrael for almost 18 years. Moreh Elisha made me a Moreh uh, about, I guess, about 16 years ago, 17 years ago. He made me a Moreh. And I've taught in the House of Israel of Atlanta and Cincinnati. And then I moved out to Philly, and I went back to New York, and now I'm here in Houston. But I've been teaching the word of the Creator, of the Most High, this whole time, spreading the message that we need to gather ourselves together to serve the Creator and stop following the ways of our enemies.
Absolutely, absolutely. I hear that you brought up the late Moreh Elisha ben Yisrael, powerful, powerful elder in our community. Man, Moreh Elisha, you know, he was one that really deconstructed, you know, Christianity, and he was one of the very first elders that I seen like openly debated different scholars as it
Mm-hmm.
pertained to were as Yisrael made the late elder continue to rest in completeness within the Azulegic world of existence and pure will. I also
Hallelujah.
see that you came to the same school as famous hip hop artist King Malachi. You know what I'm saying? Are you familiar
Yeah.
with King Malachi, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So you know, he was an understudy of Moreh Elisha as well. Um, so let's get into it.
Yes,
So
sir.
said, you know, you came into the truth. Give us a brief synopsis how you know you like before you get into that a little bit about you know your childhood background when it comes to spirituality, religion, culture.
Mm-hmm.
How did you grow up as in New York? And matter of fact, shout out to EPMD. You come out of Long Island. I think
Mm-hmm.
Rakim from Long Island
Yeah,
too.
Rock
So
Caps from Long Island, EPMD, Eric Sermon, Keith Murray, Buster
yeah,
Rhymes, man, um,
mhm,
on and on. Strong Island,
absolutely.
you know.
Yeah. So a lot of a lot of famous cats come from out of Long Island. So give us a little bit about your upbringing, you know, and where your family was at spiritually, culturally.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I grew up my parents raised us as Baptists in the church, the Black Baptist Church. Um, my parents they weren't big church goers. Especially my father wasn't a big church goer. My mother was the one that was more into it, but they didn't make us do much in the church. But that's how they were raised, and that's how we were raised. And I stepped away. I stopped believing in Christianity when I was probably 13 or 14 years old. I realized that was a bunch of crap. And then I went on my spiritual journey from thenceforth. The first thing I came into on my own was a 5%er, Nations of the Gods and Earths. I became a 5%er, what they call God Body, probably when I was around 17 years old. And I studied with the gods. And, you know, acquired knowledge in that way, learned supreme mathematics, supreme alphabet, 120 lessons and things in that manner, and dibbled and dabbled in it, you know, and then I moved on to do other things, study various spiritualities, African spirituality, Egypt, Kemet, the Gilgamesh, uh, Quran, you know, the Kabbalah, you name it, I studied it, you know, and then by the time I was in college and I met people that was uh, keeping the Torah, I thought I knew about it, but I didn't. And when I grab hold to it, then I seen that was the truth I was looking for all along, you know. But I've been in pretty much every school of spiritual thought you can deal with.
Okay, absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So I see that through your process, you was traveling in search of self, like many of us. And so the listening audience will know when he said the late Moray, Elisha ben Yisrael made him a Moray. In the Hebrew culture, Moray is an intensified student, also teacher. Okay, so everybody know the late Moray Elisha made him a Moray a teacher. And that's definitely an honor from somebody like the late Moray Elisha. And I'm going to get into that because Moray Elisha was hard as now. You know
Oh,
what I'm saying? So I definitely want to get into, just learning from this powerful elder because, where we come from, we sat under elders and like this generation that's coming up now, they more or less learn on social media.
right,
Whereas though when we were coming up in Israel, we sat under elders.
right.
Um, Now you're in college and you're learning about Torah and you're hearing this for the first time in a sense of how it should have been presented to you. More or less, you was probably reading it more or less just to have a form of knowledge, but you didn't have the understanding. Um, how did you connect with this Torah? How did you start to identify as being an Israelite? Many of us, we come through listening to Deuteronomy 28, reading Babylon and Timbuktu, things like that. How did it resonate in your spirit that you was an Israelite?
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I was like I said, I did a lot of studying. I studied a lot of things: Black culture, African American history, African history. So I was very into just the studies of history. Before I came into the knowledge, I was into Black history. I knew about Black history beyond what they teach you in the schools and things in that manner. So when I started reading the Torah, I started connecting the dots like this is about us. This is about our people. I could see that was about our people. So when I came to Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, it was clear as day to me. The knowledge the Creator had already endowed me with to be able to understand what we went through as a people historically, how all the things that Deuteronomy 28 goes over, for me, it just was the information that was missing from the history books. You understand? And it was easy for me to put that together. So that's really how I was able to understand the word of the Most High the way I was, because He really prepared me to be able to understand who I was before I actually started reading His book. He had me go into the various schools and get this knowledge, and then once I saw it in the Torah, it made it plain and made it straight.
Okay. So now you were saying that you met some people in college that were Israelites. Were they a part of the house of Yisrael? These
Yeah.
people that you met in college, and they led you to Moray Elisha.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Tell us about your first encounters with Moray Elisha and your progress.
Yeah. Well, like you said, Alicia was hard, man, and ironically, when I first met Ishyah, one of my brothers, he brought Maury Ishyah up to our campus, and I went to Central State University near Dayton, Ohio, and he brought Maury Ishyah up to speak. And at the time that he did that, I was not seeking to see. I wasn't reading or, on that path to be a Hebrew. I was still just in my search and seeking and study mode. And so when Ishyah came up there, I act like I thought I knew all about, Black Israelites, growing up in New York and seeing them on the corner and things in that manner was an everyday occurrence. When you were in Harlem and things like that, we saw them all the time. So the initial rhetoric that I heard Ishyah speaking, I really paid no mind to. I was like, man, I heard all this before. And I ended up debating Maury Ishyah, kind of, called myself debating him while he was speaking at the college. He embarrassed me, of course. Completely embarrassed me. But but once I actually started getting into the scriptures and I learned who I was, I went to my brother that brought him and I asked him, I said, hey, the elder. Take me to go see this man that you brought to us at that time. And that's how I got to go see Maury Ishyah in Cincinnati. The guy that brought him to our school. I traveled with him to Cincinnati to go to a Shabbat service and hear Maury Ishyah teach, and it was on from there.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Because I know he used to do he used to have the conferences. He had a part of different conferences because my first introduction to the late Maury Ishyah was through the Jerusalem Chronicle newspaper. Because for 5.5 years, I was a contributing columnist for the Jerusalem Chronicle newspaper. So that's how I got in contact with him, and also through, Prince Kaz and all that. So that's how I was able to, get involved. So give us a brief synopsis on the atmosphere of the Israelite community out of the House of Israel in Cincinnati, because one of the things that you brought up, Silicon, that's very important to me is the first impression of an Israelite is what you see on the street corner, was identified as the One West camps. Because most times, when people come into Israel or they hear about the Israelites, the first thing they think about is those on the street corner. Could you give some of the differences that you seen coming out of the House of Israel versus what you were seeing on the street corner?
Yeah, it was pretty interesting, amazing for real, because growing up, the Israelites we seen on the street corner, it was just, when you're a kid and you're living in New York and you're not of that, you don't know what it is. And all as a kid, all I saw was these guys on the corner with these pictures of JC, and they was talking crazy about him. And as a kid, you're like, man, who is these? These guys are crazy, And then until you get some knowledge, and you're like, oh, okay, that's what they was dealing with. But but my perspective of Israelites was brothers on the corner hollering about the black man and 400 years. But when I came into the knowledge and I learned what was really going on, then you learn that there's different camps, different organizations, different schools of thought, just all the differences that you learn about. And the thing about being with Ishyah and learning from Ishyah is that he was a unique teacher. He didn't shy away from debating. He was just as strong as or stronger than anyone you would meet in that type of realm. And as they say today, Alicia was ready for all the smoke, wanted all the smoke, gave all the smoke. And I as a young person, as a young man, I was ready for all the smoke. I thought I was anyway, and I was ready to give all the smoke. And so his type of teaching, his style, and his what he was doing fit well with what I was about, and I went for it. And learning who the One West was, as they call him, and things in that manner, and knowing the true history of where it all comes from. You know, I see my historical perspective, and a knowledgeable historical perspective. I see where we all came from, and I see how divided everybody is today. But I was able to really get an understanding that we've been, splintered due to following after things that aren't even the truth. But Alicia's teachings was great preparation to see, you know, where everything come from and how you can match it all up with the scriptures. If that answers your
It's
question.
very, it was perfect. It was perfect. Again, may Elder Alicia's memory continue to be amongst us, because we know in Devarim, or Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 7, it tells us to seek the path of our fathers and go to our Zakwanim, or our elders, that they may tell us. So it's very important that I always make mention and give accolades to the elders that
Yes.
came before us. A lot of people don't know the foundation of the Israelite culture in the United States. Many lives were taken. Here's like a prime example. In 1902, there was a man by the name of Prophet Frank Smith that started what is known as Temple Elohim out in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in an area known as Homewood. And you still have to this day more Elion ben Yisrael that runs it. And because he was teaching former black slaves that they were Israelites, you're Gentiles, they literally in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1902 lynched him to death and set his body on fire. To say all that him and countless others have lost their lives teaching about this culture. So it's
Right.
very important to keep alive those that came before us. So this is why I'm focusing on more Elisha and the impact that you and also the brothers and sisters out in Cincinnati. Give a shout out to the House of Israel out in Cincinnati.
Praise the
So
mighty one.
now, yeah, you're now you're finding out who you are reading Deuteronomy or Devarim chapter 28, Vayikra, Leviticus, the 26th chapter, all throughout the Tanakh. You're finding these historical prognostications, these prophecies that are identifying a specific people.
Right.
But for a second, step outside Tanakh briefly, and let's speak historically. Not to say that the Tanakh isn't historical, because it is, but for the layman and even the scholar that might beg to differ, um, did your teacher, More Elisha, and also through your own research, discover the Israelite connections in Africa? And are there tribes in Africa that's identifying themselves as Israelites? Could you give us some historical analysis of that?
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. The thing about Maury Alicia, like I said, he wanted all the smoke, was ready for all of it, and he didn't shy away from where people might think that they're not strong at. Alicia, when I came into the knowledge, when I came into the House of Israel, as you mentioned, this restoration of the sacred laws of the Most High conferences that Maury Alicia started, and when I came in, it was right when the House of Israel was about to have another conference, but this particular conference they were having was going to be in Washington, D.C. And the point of this conference was to go to Washington, D.C. and proclaim, before the world essentially that we are the children of Yisrael, that Yah is our only Elohim and only Savior, and that the Most High is the truth. And Maury Elisha called this gathering and this event the World In Gathering of the Children of Yisrael. And what he did was, what's that?
Not to cut you off, so everybody know, you might have other Israelites that did this later, but documented on record, Maury Elisha was the first one to do this. Continue.
Yes, he was. This is 20 years ago, and then and you was around at that time, and we went to Washington D.C. and he called this the World In Gathering of the Children of Israel. And one of the things he did was he reached out to Hebrews around the world, and what he was able to do was bring Hebrews from Africa, like the Limba. And at the time, the head of the Limbas, really the mayor of the city and the representative and delegate for the Limbas at that time, was a man named Samuel Moeti, who's passed away now. He came to Washington, D.C. and spoke. And you'll find this on our YouTube pages and our website. You'll find the recording. Samuel Moeti came. We had Igbo. We had Ashanti. And these were we had representatives of these nations there proclaiming with us that they knew and that they were Hebrew. They told us the traditions they followed that they found were right in the Torah when they didn't even know it at the time. And then they were able to learn that it was in the Torah and they were doing it. Circumcision on the 8th day, eating kosher, as they say, eating clean, no swine, no catfish, no shellfish and things in this manner, no blood, separating their women. So they were in there, right there, ingrained in their culture, and the things that they were doing is the Torah. The Ashanti, historically speaking, as you're asking, when I met Rudolph Windsor, for instance, I met Rudolph Windsor at this event that I'm telling you about, and he was selling his book From Babylon to Timbuktu. Well, Babylon to Timbuktu has been a book out since the 1970s. And my mother had From Babylon to Timbuktu on her library shelf. I saw the book growing up, you understand? And so I was aware of the historical implications of the children of Yisrael, even outside of what we say the Holy Scriptures, people that are looking for validation of the Hebrew culture and faith in the historical references and looking for the historicity of these things. Well, we were able to not only meet the people, but we were able to find various historical documents and writings by various people about our people. And they, a lot of times the African spiritualists and people that follow African spiritualism like to say that our great teachers, our great elder teachers like Sheikh Anta Diop or the brother that wrote from Babylon, not Babylon, but the brother that wrote They Came Before Columbus, his name escapes me right now. The brother that wrote, Ivan Van Sertima, Dr. Henry Clark. They say that you might hear them criticize the Bible, but they use the scriptures. Ivan Van Sertima, one of them, he has a book. He was an editor in a book that was discussing the African origins of the Western Hemisphere and the African origins of the Western civilizations. In that book, he references Hebrew culture, Hebrew events, wars between Syria and the children of Yisrael as actual historical events. And so we were very much in tune with the various different people that have been scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, as the scriptures let us know, that prove that we are the Hebrews, and they are in what the continent that's called Africa and Asia and South America, and we're very influential in these places.
That's very interesting that you would bring up them scholars. For a point of reference for the listening audience, I would like to read a couple of quotations from them scholars that you mentioned. One, I want to read something that Sheikh Anta Diop said. He wrote something called Pre-Colonial Black Africa on page 233. This is coming from Sheikh Anta Diop, or some pronounce Diop. He says, according to Tariq el-Fatah, an Israelite minority also lived in the bent of the Niger region in Tamdarma and had made a speciality of cultivating vegetables, water with fresh well water instead of river water. Now that's very important. And what I'm doing is, when the Moray is giving us the information about the historicity of us being Israel, I'm just validating what he's saying through these same Afrocentric scholars that the Black conscious community respects. Now, Sheikh Anta Diop, or Diop, said, according to Tariq el-Fatah, Tariq el-Fatah was an eyewitness in 1652 in Timbuktu. And he's saying that there were Israelites in this region, right?
Yes.
And then you mentioned about Dr. John Henry Clark. And I found that very interesting. And Dr. John Henry Clark's in the introduction to Alfred J. Butler's book, The Arab Conquest of Egypt in the Last 30 Years of the Roman Dominion. He says Roman exploitation, taxation, and ruthlessness caused a lot of the original Africans in North Africa to move further into the body of Africa. The question is often asked, what happened to North Africa's Black population? This is part of the answer. So Dr. John Henry Clark, in the introduction to the Arab conquest of Egypt in the last 30 years of the Roman dominion, he's saying out of his mouth that these original North Africans pushed deeper into the body of Africa. Now, one might say, well, he didn't mention Hebrews. He didn't say anything about that. Well, if you go to Dr. John Henry Clark's book, Notes for an African World Revolution, Africans at the Crossroads, on page 276, he says this: there is a need now to study the migration of the Israelites after 70 AD, when the Romans destroyed their temples and started the dispersal of the Israelites of that day. Where indeed did they go? There is some evidence that some of them migrated south into the body of Africa. So now we got Dr. John Henry Clark out of his mouth saying that Israelites went into West Africa. We have Sheikh Anta Diop quoting Tariq el-Fatah, who was an eyewitness in 1652 in Timbuktu, saying in the region of Tamdarma, there was a minority of Israelites that specialized in cultivating vegetables in well water instead of river water, right? And then we also got on page 76 in Yosef A. Ben Yokanayan's book, African Origins of the Major Western Religions. He breaks down that in 115 CE, there was a war in Sarentia, and that the Romans started to push the Israelites into West Africa, and they started to amalgamate with the indigenous populations that were there and wind up getting caught up in the transatlantic slave trade. So now we talk about three powerful scholars within the Black conscious community: Sheikh Anta Diop, or Sheikh Anta Diop, Dr. John Henry Clark, and Dr. Yosef A. Ben Yokanayan. All three of these scholars are saying that the Israelites did migrate into West Africa. So if the Israelites migrated into West Africa, naturally, we have to not just assume, but through logic, that Israelites also came on the slave ships. So,
Exactly.
you know, I'm glad that you brought that up, but continue where you left off. I just wanted to add that in there to give like a historical record as to
Right.
what you're saying. Like you're just saying these scholars, but I wanted to go into the sources and references of these scholars where out of their own mouth they're saying that the Israelites did migrate into West Africa and got caught up in the transatlantic slave trade.
Oh yeah.
Continue on.
Oh no, that was beautiful. That was beautiful. Great interjection for what you brought forward to bring some tangible proof to what I was saying, because I don't remember the name of the books. So that was good. But I know, years ago I studied all of that and wrote it in a lot of papers that I presented. But the only thing else that I wanted to say about that was even in our Black conscious community should know this. But one of the things that I found very interesting was nations like the Ashanti, because if there's the controversy that Hebrews aren't real people, or they don't really exist, or there's no historical evidence of Hebrews in Africa, the Ashanti people, they get their name from the Holy Scriptures. The Ashanti people come from the Ashan in Hebrew, in the Hebrew Scriptures. That's the people of the smoke. That's what the Ashan is, the people of the smoke. Ashan is the Hebrew name, and T is their Bantu addition, and T means people of. Ashan is the people of Ashan, and Ashan is a city of a priest in the cities of Yehuda. And these were the Ashanti. And not only this, but the leader of the Ashanti people in West Africa, in Ghana, would wear the breastplate, 12 stones, and would wear the breastplate. And this is factual, I think they might still do that. And not only that, they sit on a stool, which in their culture, they call it the stool of Moses. This is what they call it. And one of the reasons I love that addition is because my mother, who did family genealogical research on our family, who she picked it up from my grandfather, her father, who did genealogical research, and this is before ancestry.com and all that stuff. They did this, and they were able to find that their origins coming out of West Africa is of the Ashanti on my mother's side. So this is something that not only I was able to see in text, but it was also passed down from my family.
So I have a question. When it really comes down to West African tradition, you have the Hebrew Israelite, understanding, but then you also have the religions of the tribes that existed there. So, so how do you correlate the traditions like the E5, A5, Voodoo, and traditions like that to Hebrew Israelite traditions? How do you correlate that?
Well, where does Ifa, Vodun, where do they get their traditions from?
Okay, so what do you feel?
Well, I asked that question in the sense of, because one thing I know about Yoruba, one thing I know about even Igbo and Ashanti traditions, though they seem to be different than Hebrew traditions, if you do digging, they are coming from the same source. It's the same situation that you'll find today in Black Americans, and you got whole families and whole communities of Black Americans that keep laws they don't even know why they keep them, and it's because that they're just keeping the traditions of their ancestors.
So here's another question. So when it really comes down to religion in the Hebrew sense, a lot of like things would like demonize like a tradition like Ifa. they would say that would be considered witchcraft. However, you have things like Kabbalah that are very close in similarity. If you were to look based on even the interviews I've done with some of the people that Prince has like brought to me, they will show that okay, even Kabbalah, I think it's called Qabala, Kabbalah, has some of the same tenets as Ifa. So is so you have like the Torah, but then you have an underlying deeper mysticism behind the Torah. Would you say that those mystical schools are the thing that connects it all, or where would you find the connection to Ifa in like?
Uh, well, for instance, in the Holy Scriptures, in the Torah, if a man has what is called in the Torah, the spirit of jealousy comes upon him, and for his wife, and the spirit of jealousy comes upon him because he has this feeling that she has done some evil and stepped out on him. What they're supposed to do is go to the priest, and she is supposed to swear before the priest that she has not done any of this evil before her husband. And the priest is supposed to give her this water from the sanctuary that has dirt from the sanctuary in the water. And when she drinks the water, if she was telling the truth, then she will become fertile and they will bear seed. But if she was lying, then what happened to her, Prince? What happened to her, Mighty Hebrew? If she's lying?
Her internals burst.
Yeah, her stomach would swell, and that's why they bursting, and her thigh would rot. Now, if you take that to a Catholic, they'll say, "Oh, that's voodoo." You take that to any Christian church, they'll call that voodoo. You take that to any ignorant Hebrew, they'll call that voodoo, not knowing that all this so-called mysticism and all these things, that's priestly things. The priest did things that the other people just didn't do. We're not allowed to do certain things. And so if you're not aware of, if we're not aware of the Torah and what it really is saying, then they might think that this is witchcraft. They might think that this is what you would call mysticism. When we wanted to know an answer from the priest didn't have to go and study like a rabbi and do all of this kind of thing. The priest, when we had our kingdom set up, would just go and ask the question, and these shining orbs would come from his breastplate and give him the answer. So to the unlearned, that's mysticism. But for somebody like myself, when I see things in African spirituality that looks very similar to the Torah, I know where the origins are coming from. Also, today, of course, and through the mixing of cultures, there are things that are unclean according to the laws of the Most High. But when you're talking about dealing with our people and why are we more the same than we are different, we're dealing with things that we just don't have knowledge of today. And we're dealing with things that people aren't being taught about. They're not being taught about how spiritual intact the word of the Creator is. The Kabbalah is just something formulated out of Judaism, trying to make sense of our normal way, especially dealing with our priests.
Hallelujah, hallelujah. You answered that brilliantly and perfectly. See, I already know that a lot of people don't know that you're very astute in different African customs and spiritualities and things like that. And I'm glad that you tackled that real easy. And that's very interesting that you speak about the drinking of the bitter waters, which we know the ashes from the temple.
Yeah.
And when you actually go to the Yoruba and the Igbo, which we know the Yoruba and the Igbo, they're the same people. We know that.
Yeah.
Besides demarcation, but they also have that similar tradition. You know what I'm saying? And one of the good books that you can get on that is Hebrewisms of West Africa.
Yes.
And inside that book, it speaks about drinking of the bitter waters. And you see, even amongst the Igbo themselves, they let you know that this understanding goes back to Levitical priests. So that was definitely a good thing that you brought up. Now,
Great.
here's something I want to ask.
So, but hold on.
I want to
Okay,
ask
I had okay. Let me let you ask your question. I ask now.
you. One of the things that we're seeing right now is the rise of, which I feel as though is very, very important. We're seeing Israel now rise from the four corners of the earth. I mean, there's no movement like no other right now. You
Right.
see Israelites all over the world gathering and returning back to the land of the promise, from East Africa to Northeastern Africa, miscalled the Middle East. You're seeing leaders such as my late master teacher, Prince Ishyah, Ben Ami. You seeing all these different leaders that rose. You see what's going on in Demona, these Israelite, the community I started in Tanzania. What is the next move on the chessboard that you see us from a nation to a civilization? What do you see that's going on right now in the state of the world and its interconnections with the gathering of Israel as a civilization? And when I say Israel, I mean the 12 tribes. I'm not talking about that. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Beautiful question. And on surface, of course, it looks like another black movement, another religious movement on surface. And some people take it as that. But the difference between the current and upcoming surge of the awakening of the children of Yisrael is it's never happened before. And so if it's happening now, and it's not just happening at an arbitrary moment, it's happening when the king of Babylon, if I could quote Isaiah the 14th chapter, is declaring his tabernacle on the glorious holy mountain, if I could quote Daniel the 11th chapter. And what I mean by that is this president, who's now the president-elect again in the United States, when he first came into office, he declared that the United States embassy would be in Jerusalem, which was controversial for the world community because these Edomites wanting to have to call Jerusalem their capital was an affront to the Palestinian community. But you have that happening. You have the upheaval of wars going on in the state of Israel and in the so-called Middle East as well. You have the alliances that are becoming more solidified between Russia and China and Ethiopia and Libya and Iran. But this is exactly out of the book of Ezekiel, the 38th and 39th chapter. The allies of Gog and Magog are mentioned. Persia, that's Iran. Ethiopia, Libya, China, and all in Gomer, because people think, oh, Germany is not with, but they will be. Germany gets all their oil from Russia. And you'll see Germany will join with Russia. Belarus is with Russia, and they're Germans. So you'll have in their alliances are becoming solidified. People are running around talking about BRICS because of the BRICS nations, but that's only a monetary system. Their alliances are being solidified, and because this is happening at the same time that this is happening, the children of Israel are starting to lift up their head. So there's no coincidences in the earth when you're dealing with the word of the Most High. And because that's happening, it's going to be a situation in which we are going to see our people join together in a manner that we have never seen before.
That's definitely, and you know why? Because like you brought up the 37, 38, and 39th chapter of Ezekiel, and we had not too long ago Adon Yehoshaphat ben Yisrael, editor and founder of Jerusalem Chronicle newspaper, and he was breaking down the second chapter and the seventh chapter of Daniel, when we see the image of the man and the four beasts, and we know that the first represents the gold, which is 586 BCE. We're talking about the Babylonian Empire under Nebuchadnezzar the first. And then you see the second, which is silver, which was the Medo-Persian Empire. And we see that was roughly around 444 BCE with King Cyrus the Great. And we also see this in the movie 300, when we see Xerxes, sending servants to talk to the Spartans. And it's funny that these servants were in fact Israelites on that movie, right? We seen that. And then you see now the bronze is rising in power under Alexander, son of Philip of Macedonia, roughly around 340 BCE, because I think he died roughly 332 BCE, somewhere around that time. We can see that during the Maccabee. When we read in the book of Maccabees, we see that he passes away, and then you see this rising of the Seleucid kings. We see that. And then we also see the Roman Empire, which is the iron, roughly around 146 BCE. We're seeing that. We're seeing Mark Antony, the alliance with Cleopatra, and how the Ptolemy, because remember, when Alexander, son of Philip of Macedonia, died, his kingdom was broken down into 4 sections. And this is where you get the Ptolemy and all these people. And then we see the fall of the Roman Empire through the barbarian tribes, the Visigoths, the Vandals, and all these guys, the Goths. They come in, break down the Roman Empire into 10 kingdoms, which became Western Europe. And in the book of Daniel, we see that this little horn or this beast man comes out, and out of these 10 toes, that's mixed with clay and iron. And we know that the iron is the Roman Empire, and the clay, those that are in opposition to the Roman Empire, because clay can't mix with iron, as the elder was breaking down to us. So these 3 toes were plucked, and historically, we know that that toe or that horn was the United States that will wear out the side. And the 3 that was plucked was Britain, because we had that Revolutionary War, and then we see the French-American War with the Louisiana State Purchase and all that. We see that, and Napoleon, all that. And then we see the Spanish-American War with the Alamo, the taking the control of California. So the 3 were plucked: Britain, France, and Spain. So it's not a coincidence that Daniel prophesied this. So now we know, and we're identifying who this little horn is. What is the next move for the children of Israel right now? What should we be doing at this present time? We know that the head of the harlot is the United States, hands down. There's no escape. So what do we do now as a people as we move forward into developing our own governmental structure?
We got to gather ourselves together. That's bottom line. We got to gather ourselves together and come together as a people and as